All right. As our clocks tick over to the 8 p.m., I would just like to welcome everyone to the Tired Boys podcast. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back for another race weekend recap. We had the Las Vegas Grand Prix this past weekend, and so the normal routine, some quick hitters, driver lineup information, and then getting into the race weekend. But we've got a lot to talk about. I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah, especially like in between the last Sao Paulo race and this past weekends in Vegas. Yeah, some updates to like driver lineups. Some big news for the Formula One grid coming up in 2026. So yeah, it seems like a lot to get through. But Aaron, good to see you. Let's just get right into the quick hitters.
Sounds good. So first off, we had Logan Sargent, our former Williams driver, getting his first IndyCar test with Meyer-Shank Racing, and he put in a really solid test. He was at the top of the leaderboard from what I was seeing, with best lap times and everything. He put in a few more laps than some of the other drivers, but a good initial test and everything, alongside like Felipe Nasser, who's former F1 driver, Enzo Fittipaldi, and a few other drivers out there. So not the full field, but a number of drivers that are looking to potentially get into a seat this coming year. So yeah, nice drive from him, it looks like, and some potential to see him continue on over in Indy on that side.
Yeah, and to be fair, I liked Logan Sargent's spirit enough when he was in Formula One. Obviously, not always getting the results he would want, but his head seemed to be in a pretty good place based on like the interviews that you would see and things like this. So I imagine he's a pretty good teammate to have, pretty good driver to want to invest in for your garage. And if he's at the top of the leaderboards, it makes sense that he would be someone that would be getting looks.
Definitely, and I think, like you said, it was never about his attitude or anything like that. He was always seemed positive until he was like bummed about the potential of losing his seat and then losing his seat. Of course, like he always great personality and everything in any interviews. Seemed like a pretty intelligent driver, just didn't quite have the pace in that Williams car to get there. So happy to see him get that opportunity to at least test over an IndyCar, and we'll see where it goes for him. But moving along, we have the Expensify APX GP team, the fake team that is going to be in Brad Pitt's upcoming Formula One movie that I assumed had just been released and that I missed it or something, because it's been a very long time that they've been filming. They had a weird stunt at the Las Vegas Grand Prix with Brad Pitt's character like passing out. Of course, they make these tweets about it and everything as well from their official team account. So very interesting little role play they've got going on there with their fanfic F1. But yeah, still filming. We'll wait to see. I'm gonna have to watch it when it comes out, just to see how cheesy it is compared to all of this build up for it.
Yeah, or maybe movie magic really does exist, and it'll be something that just blows your socks off, and you're like, wow, how did such a weird looking moment turn into something actually dramatic and emotion provoking. I just hope, going back to the previous point, I just hope Apex GP is not looking for American drivers, because that phone call, if I'm Logan Sargent, is not one that I want. That is not a move that I'd be happy to make, right?
Yeah, I don't think he would come back for an offer from Expensify APX. I think that would be one that you just have to pass on and give that opportunity to another driver out there.
For sure, for sure. Weirder than the like Formula One fan fiction being proposed by Expensify GP. We find that maybe the fans don't realize they're not a real team either. We have shout outs for Sonny and Joshua in the comments, hoping to see them get well. So yeah, whatever crash happened in that qualifying session, man, must have really shaken some feathers.
Oh yeah, the fans of the team are definitely. I hope that they're just doing a bit. That would be my hope. But if not, then full support to you. You love what you love. I'm not gonna yuck your yum. But to move on, we have Damon Hill parting ways with Sky Sports F1. So it seems as though they just couldn't come to a contract negotiation. They just weren't meeting where they needed to, so they're going to be parting ways this upcoming year. My big question is, when can they do that with Danica Patrick? Because I'm over it. But anyway, I guess she's still just here indefinitely to irritate Jensen Button when they're doing commentary next to each other. The leading up to the Las Vegas Grand Prix, Yuki Tsunoda was taken into questioning when he was returning to the U.S. He was held and interrogated by customs or whoever, border patrol or whatnot, for a couple of hours in his PJs. They didn't apparently believe that he was a Formula One driver, so took him a little time to get through. He was not traveling with his physio, who he normally travels with, so there wasn't another person really available there to help him out as much. I guess he was coming back early for a V-carb, like some promotional content creation and whatnot. So yeah, little funky situation. He laughed it off pretty well though, it seemed, but definitely odd to get caught up like that.
Yeah, well, that's kind of like being in some way probably like a movie star, like a singer or something that isn't immediately recognized. You're like, no, but wait, I was in American Pie, don't you know? You're like, no, guy, come on, we need your ID. I'm sorry, I don't have one, but like, I was in American Pie. They're like, no, 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 no. Like, Formula One is just something I wouldn't believe it. If I'm just like rent a cop and some guy's like, no, trust me, I drive cars really fast. Like, I'm supposed to be here. I'd be like, hold your horses.
I mean, the first thing I would do is be like, Google the name on my passport, and then look and see that my passport has a stamp from Brazil 3 weeks ago, and then a stamp from wherever from Mexico a week before that, and a stamp from the US again a week before that. Like,
Okay,
my
yeah.
travel, like, look at the F1 calendar. These all line up. I feel like it would have been a pretty easy thing to talk through, as long as you're with some understanding people who are just trying to get to the bottom of things. But
Now, U.S. Customs, they lock it down. They make sure that we know whatever's going on here, we're going to get to the bottom of it, but no easy outs. No Googling. We got to figure it out ourselves. But U.S. Customs, they are the place to be.
oh yeah, so hanging out, just a brief pit stop for Yuki there. But then we have some race updates. So for the upcoming Grand Prix, so in 2026, the Canadian Grand Prix will be moved on the calendar, and so I'm assuming it's going to be shifted a little further back to coincide a little bit better with the other U.S. like Grand Prix. So the U.S. Grand Prix in Mexico City and Brazil and everything, to hopefully kind of keep all of the travel in Europe for a long stint, and then kind of continue around the world in that effort to become carbon neutral and environmentally friendly with F1, which we had talked about when they were announcing races and everything, and we were looking at the schedule. So definitely just a little quality of life update there for the F1 calendar. And along with that, the Monaco Grand Prix was extended to 2031, and they're going to be changing when that is on the calendar. So that means that there will no longer be a Monaco Grand Prix Indy 500 mega day of just sitting watching cars go fast or slow in corners for the entire day. But it's kind of nice that those two big events are separated a little.
Oh no. See, but that means now that NASCAR world phenom, what's his name?
Kyle Larson.
Tyler Kyle Larson. I mean, he's not going to be able to do the feat that nobody asked for, doing the IndyCar 500 and the Monaco Grand Prix.
I know it's pretty tough. He can't triple head it and start with the Monaco Grand Prix, go to the Indy 500, and then helicopter over to the Coke 600 over there and just knock out all three in one day.
Dude, you're just ruining my boy's legacy. Like, honestly, this rule change benefits nobody, and Kyle Larson is the only one that loses.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just terrible. No benefit to the environment or anything to shift these races around on the calendar. They ruined this opportunity for Kyle. So yeah,
Our goat.
yes, the best driver of them all. So
Or
yeah.
none. Period.
Yeah.
No,
No.
on a more serious note, seriously, for the calendar though, I'm interested in how far they're able to take it, and is there a world where they're able to have like a what would be the word? Not heat, but like a three stage competition where you would get like the European theater, the American theater, and then like I guess what would that be, like an Asian? Because like, are there enough races where they could space them out in that way, where you're like in one region of the world for like a set piece of time? Whether that's like beneficial or not, but I'd just be curious if they'd like be able to get true like region separation. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so you mean something like you have race weekends while you're in Europe with like European F4 added on instead of just like F2, F3, like you have that mixed in, and then like while you're in Asia you do the same thing with like like Asian F4, and then like
Yeah, of course. And instead of like bouncing back and forth between like, like now you're in Germany, now you're in Japan, and like things like this, if you kept it kind of, we're over here for a little while, now we're over here, and then we hop across the pond, and then we end like wherever. I just think it'd be interesting if they were able to.
Well, I think that is hopefully the goal with like
right.
kind of having the segment, and I think this is a big step closer. This is like, I feel like the Miami Grand Prix right now is the only one that stands out in my mind as being kind of potentially out of that alignment, where that was pretty early in the year compared to the rest of these North American and South American races. So hopefully, I mean, I think that would be the ideal situation to just make it easier on travel, on parts and everything, getting the cars where they need to go. Much more convenient. But my only concern, I guess, would be if they're just gonna hit us with like all these big stacked up like races, triple headers, then a week off, then a double header, and it's all crammed in with then larger breaks in between each of those segments of the calendar. I don't know if that's ideal.
Sure.
But either way, I think this is a step towards kind of lining things up a bit better.
Yeah, and a big step too, and it's pretty exciting, honestly, because it always does feel weird, if only for like organization's sake, that they do these weird like, yeah, it's Miami, and then the next weekend you're in like Silverstone or whatever, and then you're bouncing
Yeah.
around. It doesn't seem to make good sense. So yeah, happy to hear that they're like shifting things around. That's really interesting, and a couple more Formula One rule changes that we want to talk about as well that could be pretty impactful to some start procedures.
Yeah, and so after the Brazilian Grand Prix, they determined they're going to update the rules so that empty grid slots, whether it's from drivers starting from the pit lane, drivers not being able to start the race and everything, like Alex Albon had, that they're just going to close up the grid. You're just going to move up one grid slot. So they'll do that preemptively ahead of starting procedures and everything, so everyone just knows they're going to be shifted up or wherever that puts them. So they'll be in that same slot with the driver in front of them, not to confuse anything. And the other one was that Red Bull actually brought a concern to the FIA about teams using protective plates over the skid blocks. We had the incidents last year where I believe one of the Mercedes cars was disqualified after, I think it was George Russell was disqualified after winning, or maybe it was earlier this year. I'm like starting to blend a little bit, but there was too much wear on the skid plate and it was too thin and they got disqualified from a race after, I think, winning or maybe being on the podium. I'm pretty sure it was one of the Mercedes. Okay. But this protective plate essentially was just being put on top of the skid plate, so there was like not as much wear going onto the skid plate, and it would make sure that it doesn't wear too much and get you DQ'd. But it's something that's not allowed in the rules, so the kibosh was put on that little workaround to making sure your car's not bottoming out too much. They're like, we can still bottom out as much, just put a little bit of extra cover on it. So yeah, slight shift there, but I think it only affected a couple of teams who were using those.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think for a track like Vegas, you really notice how much they were kind of bottoming out on some sections of those straights. You would see the sparking from the skid plates like a good bit during this past weekend's race.
Yeah. So that, I think they were one of the ones who was hit by this after, I'm assuming they put that in place after after that disqualification or what exactly happened there. But yeah, moving over to a little bit of Alpine news. They're planning to switch to Mercedes power units. We talked about them abandoning the Renault engine project, but they'll be switching to Mercedes power in 2026. And then some subtle foreshadowing, but it was an interesting stat I saw. But Pierre Gasly, leading into the Las Vegas Grand Prix, had not cost his team a single dollar in damages across the entire season up to this point. So no punctures, broken chassis, even like a rear wing or anything like that he had broken in any way. So a pretty wild thing, unfortunately. During the Grand Prix this weekend, his car kind of exploded, and that's no longer the case. But up until that point, this deep into the season, it's pretty wild.
Well, Gasly wouldn't have caused that engine issue, so I would still hold that he's
would too.
Not clean. Yep,
but exactly. I guess it was like no damage to his car. I guess across the season, but
sure.
Yeah.
And then a very critical angle on that would be, it's not a good thing at all. It just means Gasly wasn't on the limit nearly as much as he should be.
That's that's one way to look at it. I heard someone say that about the NFL the other day. I was watching like a podcast, and they were like, they're like, yeah, I don't want a quarterback who throws no interceptions, because if they're not throwing any interceptions, then that means they're not really going for it. Like throwing these. I'm
Okay,
like,
sure.
all right, I guess so. So Gasly's just not driving on the limit enough to crash his car. You need one good crash to really show that you're pushing it to the limit.
Yeah, multiple crashes, you're in Logan Sargent territory, but too few crashes, and you start to wonder, like, is this guy's heart really in it?
Yeah, the P2 last week definite, or P3 didn't mean anything. He's not in it.
Dude, no, but I was like laughing out loud watching the race when you hear the radio messages, and it could have just been like the timing, whatever, but it's like, I've got no power, I've got no power. Everything looks fine on our end as his engine is like coming out the back of his car, and they're like, yeah, all looks good over here, man.
Yeah, the data is fine. Well, the puff of smoke that I saw in my mirrors is like not a good sign, bud.
Dude, the
Yeah,
difference of the like information basically was just it was too good. It was making me, I was bowled over.
Oh yeah, that was pretty entertaining, because they had the radio messages, and then very shortly after, it was like 5 seconds later, they just panned to Gasly and there's smoke coming out of his
Yep.
car, and I was like,
Yep.
oh, I was like, check back on that. Be a little more like Ferrari. We are checking, and then you take a couple of minutes, and then by then Gasly's already come back into the pits and parked the car, and they're like, "Yes, retire the car." So yeah, that was entertaining, but I mean, good on him for not causing damage to the car across the year and everything. That's I mean, when you're in a spot like Alpine, where you're just trying to continue to develop the car and everything, and we've seen some of the other teams that were towards the back of the grid really losing a lot of their budget to repairs and things like that across the year, particularly the Williams squad. Alpine has really made some progress, especially now late into the season, and it wouldn't shock me if some of those extra funds kind of play into that fact.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting angle, and it also tells you by that stat who everybody believes is like at fault in the Ocon versus Gasly in the Monaco turn. Like, clearly that's just absolving Gasly of like any fault at all. They're like, he hasn't caused any damage. So
Yeah.
any damage on Gasly's car was Ocon's fault for just like basically just like running himself into the wall, whatever happened there.
Yeah.
So yeah, just more memories from Monaco. Yeah, keep it on the schedule. That's what I say. But the big news for Formula One coming up right now, we got it for you. 2026 is going to be loaded, if you will.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a packed grid. We could have some people starting from the pit lane and still have a 20 car grid, because we are looking at F1 and GM Cadillac team being added to the grid. So the proposal was put out there for 2026. Formula One has accepted the proposal, and it sounds pretty exciting. They're going to be using Ferrari power units for the first couple of years before Cadillac will take over the engine manufacturing in 2028. We have Mario Andretti getting the opportunity to be, I think it's a board position or something like that. So some involvement with that team in getting himself back into Formula one way or another. He was finding a way in. But I think it's good. He clearly has the passion to get a team there, and if the Cadillac GM partnership is more suitable and makes more sense for the grid and Formula One to accept it than just the Andretti Motorsports team, hey, then it sounds like that might be the way to go if we're gonna add another team to the grid.
And it sounded like one of the large motivating factors was the expansion into North America, where over the last, I'd say, 5 years, from, me first getting into the sport and seeing how much it's grown, seeing the attendance grow at the North American races kind of year after year. It feels like part of the partnership is looking to capitalize on that growing market in the Americas and bring in like a really strong kind of American name or American what's the term that they use? OEM,
Like a
an American.
brand.
Yep, a
Yeah.
strong like American brand into Formula One, and that kind of being value added to Formula One, and it like going both ways, it being more symbiotic as opposed to like one name gaining more value from the partnership than another kind of deal. So based
Yeah.
on what I'm seeing, it does feel like they are moving forward for a 11 team grid in 2026. Now, I will be honest, the media around it hasn't been all that clear, but it feels like based on some of the language that is what to expect and that is what's happening. So I think that's the pretense that we're going to operate with until we get like more info or like more precise information. But yeah, based on what I'm reading, it does sound like 11 team grid in 2026. GM Cadillac going to be one of the big names behind it, and that is interesting to say the least. Because if you've been with us for a little while and you remember some of our previous episodes, like I wasn't like I'm not that high on it as like just like a general idea. I understand where Formula One's coming from, but I'm more of a yeah. Let's wait and see. Let's see how it kind of turns out and think about it from like a competitiveness standpoint, because that's really my concern. Like if we just have an 11 team dud onto the grid and they're not competitive, they're not really moving at all, I mean, who's that benefiting? So that's kind of my main concern, but looking forward to it. We'll see what happens. But yeah, and I think they already have some either like IndyCar drivers, maybe some other names like being tossed around the hat.
Yeah, Colton Herta was floated out there as a potential driver, and I'd be curious to see if they are looking at any of the other series that Cadillac is racing in as well. Because and GM, they do race in some of the endurance championships and everything, and so they have drivers. Whether they have single seat car drivers that they would want to fill in, or are looking at something like Formula 2 driver, another former Formula 1 driver, or maybe snagging someone who is at the end of their contract at the end of next year. There's some flexibility there, but I think, like you said, with that, bringing in the American like brand and putting some emphasis on that, a driver like Colton Herta, who is rumored to be a potential Formula One driver previously, and who now we talked about earlier this year has the super license points to be able to drive in Formula One, becomes an option that he wasn't a couple years ago.
Oh, that's such a sick angle, dude. Whoa.
They
This
were
is like
waiting for
really.
Colton Herta to get his super license, and they're like, "Now's the time to submit our proposal. We can get him in here."
That's actually timed beautifully. Like we always talk about the windows and doors of opportunity that open and close very quickly in Formula One, and yeah, that's an angle that I wasn't even thinking about. But damn, yeah, that feels like two solid doors may have just opened for 2026.
Yeah, and we've also talked about it. There's a lot of young talent that's around the grid. People who like a Franco Colapinto, who currently doesn't have a seat for 2025, that is proven himself as a solid driver over the last few weeks here on the Williams squad. So there's going to be those opportunities as well, along with the upcoming F2 grid and just the driver market in general. I think there's going to be a good amount of opportunities for different drivers, but it would be cool to see someone like Herta come in to that seat. But sliding right on from there into our Do You Work Here segment, we've got some official F1 announcements and all with driver lineups. Gabriel Bortoleto, Brazilian Formula 2 driver, is confirmed as the second seat for Kick Sauber this coming year to drive alongside Nico Hulkenberg. He's having a great F2 campaign. He's, I believe, still in the lead in the championship. So potential F1 champion, F2 champion joining the F1 grid if things continue on that trajectory for these last couple of races. But yeah, congratulations to him. I think it seems like a solid opportunity to test some young talent alongside a solid driver like Hulkenberg. So just one spot left on the grid to finalize now.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. And he is in the same boat as like George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Lando, correct? Like they all won their Formula 2 championship.
Lando did not. I believe Piastri did.
Piastri. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so George Russell. Trying to think if there are any other F2 winners, but those would be the primary ones that come to mind. So,
but yeah, they have quickly leveled up their game over the years that they've been in Formula One. So thinking of it as like a benchmark, right, of like performance to come, if you will. He is in a camp with some really strong names that have, leveled up as they've been in the sport. So yeah, that's really exciting. I believe Formula 2 has two more.
Yeah, the last two races will be
two more rounds. Yep. We have Qatar and the
Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi, yep. But yeah, so a couple more races before the Formula 2 championship is decided. But yeah, Bortoleto is looking like a very spicy pickup. Last seat that we're looking for, when you said that, it did not quickly ring a bell. What's the last seat that we're looking for?
So technically it's the second V-carb seat, the Daniel Ricciardo seat. That hasn't officially been confirmed. But before we talk about that at all, so with Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas leaving the Kick Sauber team, it's been rumored that Zhou may become a reserve driver for Ferrari. So looking for just someone who has some F1 experience to put into that reserve driver seat. Sounds like that's a decent option for them. They're losing their reserve driver of Ollie Behrman as he joins Haas this coming year. Mm-hmm. So they need to fill that, and that's an easy way. Zhou doesn't have too much damage on his car to his name this year either. Be that because he's 2 seconds off the back of the grid in qualifying or not, then it is what it is. But a safe driver option at least for a reserve.
Yeah, definitely. And they'll, pick up some of the like sim responsibilities, some of the like scouting responsibilities for like track work and things like this. So not an inactive role in a team, obviously. So he'll definitely be getting that, in and around working Formula One team, keeping his like ring rust off, that kind of deal. Because, drivers that are kind of in that reserve seat potential, they're always looking for a way back into the conversation. We heard the phrase a lot this weekend, the in the shop window, as it were. So, yeah, that's a good way for Zhou to stay in the shop window.
Yeah, and for Zhou, from everything I had looked at too, I was I think I had talked about it maybe on one of the last episodes, but I was looking up what his potential options would be if they're like if he had come out and said, "Oh, I'm interested in XYZ series," and there wasn't really much out there. He said, I want to be in Formula One if that means I don't have a seat this year and I go for a seat the coming year. It wouldn't shock me if he was approaching teams with his management saying, "Hey, I'd love to be a reserve driver for you, be there to potentially prove myself in the future to see if I can get back onto the grid." If that's what he wants to do and be in Formula One exclusively, which is what I could surmise from his interviews and all, Sounds like that's his best option for the coming year.
Yeah, and good on him. He knows, he knows where he belongs, and he's going to do what it takes to stay there. I respect that. I appreciate that.
And I think the other like positive for him with going to Ferrari potentially, if you do have an incident, we've had multiple times across the season where we've needed reserve drivers for different reasons. If there's someone who ends up being out for a race and he comes in and blows everyone's socks off in a good car, then that kind of makes up for not being able to show his skills really in a pretty bad kick Sauber car. So yeah, I think a decent opportunity. But looking at that last V carb seat, the big news is that it just is undecided primarily because Helmut Marko and Christian Horner can't come to much of an agreement on the 2025 four-driver lineup. Checo, of course, he's been struggling. He's had Yuki and Liam Lawson out-qualify him in the last 3 races now. He had Yuki beat him in the race this past weekend. So his name has obviously been coming up a lot as potentially being out, and where that moves people around. Franco Colapinto's name was thrown out with Red Bull talking to the Williams team a little bit over the Brazilian Grand Prix weekend. So it seems like there's just a lot of little bits and pieces up in the air to wait to decide. And at this point, I'm just expecting we won't hear until after the end of the season.
Yeah, that's an interesting instinct. I think I lean towards agreeing with you. It is a hotly contested seat. Sergio Stock's not up right now. I genuinely it's been weirdly, it's like one of the main topics of conversation, and it like totally slipped my mind that it hadn't been decided, and that's like a weird thing to have happen. If I'm choosing, I think it's so what are the possible permutations here? Like, who do they move up? Like, do they move somebody up? Is it for the second, right? You see what I'm asking? Like, what seat is actually up for contention?
And I think that's the big question. I think that Checo has a contract, so you look at his seat as being solidified. It's the way that I look at it from the outside is we have one seat on V-Carb that's available. Do you want Liam Lawson in there? Do you want Franco Colapinto in there? Do you want one of those guys to be a reserve driver? And if you can Checo, they slide in as a reserve or whatever, and you shift things around then. But I think overall, I'm assuming that Checo's in the seat, whether I think he should be or not. I mean, just looking at his finishes, he's finished just so far that like P6 is his best finish since Miami, the 6th race of the season.
That's awful.
He's finished outside the points multiple times, 3 different times, P10 a couple of times, some P7s, P8s, but a P6 in the Netherlands is his top finish since Miami. And that's just pretty brutal. I think he's only scored like I think I saw a stat, it was like 46 points over the past like 10 races or something like that.
Wild.
Which compared to Max is just pretty brutal. He is 56 points back from Lewis in a car that Max just won the world championship in. So being down in P8, he's at least in that top 4 teams. He hasn't fallen below Alonso or anyone else, but it's still just a pretty rough stretch for Checo, and I think that if Red Bull announces it, Checo's seat might be open. But until then, I think we can't really assume.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. And I was just curious. Then it just seems like the easy answer is probably just what it is right now. It'll probably just be Liam Lawson.
That makes the most sense to me. And along with Checo, he brings a ton of sponsorship money. As a being the only Mexican driver on the grid, Kit Kat just sponsored him as well, so he's got like big brands that sponsor him, and that definitely plays a part in Formula One. It's not a shock that having money behind your name helps, but I think that's it's still to be seen if he'll have a spot. But for now, he's got a contract.
Yeah, gotcha. I guess part of me assumed with them bringing Liam Lawson in, I, I think part of me was just like, well, yeah, that's probably it then.
Made the most sense. And when it happened,
Yeah.
I was basically in my mind, I had said that the Sauber seat was I'm sure I had said it on the podcast that the Sauber seat was the last seat
Right,
available.
right. Yeah, I guess that's why it kind of confused me. But yeah, okay, all right, sure. All
So
right.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm with
technically.
you. I'm caught up.
But to head into the Las Vegas Grand Prix weekend, before we do that, we just want to take a quick moment to remind you if you're listening, make sure you're following. You've hit that follow button, subscribe button. We are still looking to hit our goal of 100 subscribers by the end of the year. It's getting down to the wire, so we appreciate it if you hit those buttons. We love putting this out. We're going to keep putting it out, and we like to have you along for the ride.
Yeah, tell your friends and family that new episodes come out after every single race weekend. We just appreciate you so much. But back to the episode.
Yep. So before we get into the winners and losers, I just a peculiar thing from the race weekend before the race and everything. We had Red Bull being reported in first practice sessions that they were losing 6/10 on every straightaway because they brought the wrong rear wing to Las Vegas. They brought one for, I don't know if it was the super high downforce Monaco wing or what wing it was. It was not the correct one. It was not the low downforce high speed wing, and they were losing a massive amount of speed. So being the very innovative team that they are, they brought out those angle grinders and just cut chunks out of the rear wings, and we're like, here you go, there's your fast wing now. So yeah, they drew some lines on there, cut them, and the Red Bull got significantly quicker on the straights. Still probably not perfect, but in a much better spot after what looked like could be a disastrous weekend in terms of, I guess, being able to wrap up the drivers' championship. I think they were down in like P17-ish for practice one, so struggling quite a bit. Or maybe it was practice two. Either way, it was not looking phenomenal until they cut the wings. So yeah, P17, P19, and FP2 for the Red Bull.
Gotcha. I mean, hey, they are resourceful, if nothing else. I mean, that type of bodywork would have to be done like at the factory and on like the very specific machining setups and whatever the heck. So if you're like that far down, while I can't imagine they want to be chopping up every rear wing that they have, it's clear those engineers like understood what had to be done and they found that time, which is like fascinating to me.
Yeah, and especially catching it after the long run sessions and everything in FP2 to be able to they looked at it and they're like, well, we can't get the correct rear wing here by qualifying. They did the number, they crunched the numbers. A plane wouldn't have gotten there in time. So yeah, it looks like they went to their only option, had to get it done before the car is in Parc Ferme, and they got it done. So a nice little fix for someone who's probably gonna lose their job for packing the wrong wing. Um,
Yes. That's such a tasty thought to know, like, something that could be happening behind the scenes.
just like I'd feel horrible to be that person. Just to be
Sure.
like, oh man, I just slip of the brain, just packed the wrong wing. Like it's
Other side of the coin, though, angle grinder guy, he gets a raise.
there you go. He gets
Whoa.
both salaries.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, you came up with that idea. All right, you get this for the last couple races.
Damn.
But yeah, so it looked pretty dire for Red Bull in terms of clinching the championship. I thought the drivers' championship might be back up for grabs for Lando, but unfortunately for him, that was not the case. Let's get into the winners and losers for this week.
My first one may be unexpected,
Okay.
but my first winner on the weekend is Max. Felt like a bit of a victory lap after Brazil. Honestly, like that race did so much to destroy Lando's chances that like just the win condition of finish ahead of Lando, like no matter what position, just ahead of him, that leaves a lot of like margin for like things going wrong and still being able to seal it up. So while the race and his performance for the world championship a little bit lackluster, a little bit like anticlimactic, like on the day, it's still a moment where he's clinching the championship early. He still had to put together a 17-1 win last weekend to like give himself like the breathing room, all of this kind of stuff. So Red Bull and Max, I do believe, are deserving of our coveted winners number one position here on the show. Because yeah, it's like the summation of a whole year. It's one. He's now. Is he 4 in a row, or is
Yep.
he like
He's
four right in a row? Yeah, like that's just kind of insane. So yeah, I can't take anything away from the guy. I think Lando's interview post race kind of summed it up, where like even he had a smile on his face, like thinking about Max. Like when he was trying to think about what to say about Max, all he could do is muster a smile, and he was like, "Yeah, this guy has no weaknesses." And I think that really sums it up, and that was like put to the test on Sunday, where he really didn't have to work that hard, but it was still he still snatched it up, still closed it out, and that's really what you want to see. So yeah, he did it, man. That's huge. Congratulations.
Yeah, and he was, of course, my first winner as well. I think this is a like you said, it's a summation of the year. So this has been the most I think he's had to fight to win the championship since fighting Lewis. And even then, like when you're looking at 2021, there's the controversy. There's no controversy this year. The Red Bull has been inconsistent, but Max has not, and he's just proved that week in, week out. Like Lando said, not making mistakes. He just knows how to be good. He knows how to make the car work for him even when the car is subpar, and he really proved his skills once again with Brazil. And going into this weekend, yeah, a nice place to clinch the world championship. It sounded like he was up all night long till his flight at like 10:30 in the morning, heading back home. So he it's a good place if you want to party all night long. Miami's probably the only other option that would match it. It's a little too early to be clinching the season. So Las Vegas, a great spot to win. But for my second winner this week, I would say us fans of Formula One and the viewers, with George Russell's win, we have seven different multiple time winners across the season. It's the most that F1's ever had in the course of a season. Obviously, when there's a 14 race season, the likelihood of 7 different people winning 2 races each, a lot slimmer than when we're at 24 races in the season. However, it's been really fun not knowing week in and week out, to go from Red Bull winning 23 out of 24 last year to this very competitive and very mixed field of winners. I think that's super exciting and just a great season of Formula One.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Thinking along that vein, we had Lando Norris's first victory. We had Oscar Piastri's first victory. We saw George Russell's first Formula One race victory, correct? Because he had, or am I just like totally stealing this guy's thunder?
No, so George had won in Brazil 2022, I think. Gotcha. I think he might have had a couple of race wins, but nonetheless, it was still George kind of solidifying himself well as the new lead guy for the Mercedes team with Lewis leaving. He also had another race win that was taken away from him earlier in the year that was given to Lewis for, forget what the disqualification was for. I think it might have been for being underweight on the car. So still being able to come get that second win on the season, it's been exciting. You don't really know week in and week out who's going to win. The cars have so much parity with where some of their strong suits are and everything as well. So it made for a really, really fun year, and we're not over yet. We still got a couple of races to go. So the fun doesn't stop here.
Yeah, that's for sure. My second winner here on the weekend, a little bit more zoomed in. I feel like the Max winner is like, yeah, that's like from a long-term, like over the course of a season viewpoint, a little more zoomed in for the race weekend point of view is Mercedes and George Russell. I think in my mind, the pole to victory conversion for a driver it's obviously like one of the strongest things you can do. Yes, there's something to be said for like P17 to P1 in a wet race. Like that is one level of impressive. That's like having been disadvantaged and then utilizing opportunities given to like improve your position. There's something to be said about the being in the advantaged position and then closing out with that, right? And especially for a driver that's often at the top of my mind comparing the two, Lando Norris, where we've seen him, I'd use the word squander a few pole positions, and we saw him not be able to get that pole to victory conversion. It's eluded him a few times, so it's clearly something that's not like, all right, for conversations around Lewis, for some conversations around Max, there's this feeling of like, well, it was going to happen anyway. If he was at the start of the field, it's just going to happen, right? He just wins, right? There is that like feeling with the Max P1 and like what used to be like a Lewis P1. Even when Valtteri was in the Mercedes, God forbid he won a qualifying session, he was likely going to win the race. Like that's kind of what it was. So, using this historical data to say, for some talents, that pole to victory conversion was like almost a shoo-in. It is now like not guaranteed for some of these drivers who are still like adding that as like a weapon in their tool belt, right? Like if I
Yeah.
get pole, I'm winning that. We've
Even
seen.
even
Go ahead.
Charles, I was gonna say Charles, and I mean, granted, the Red Bull has been a pretty uh, dominant car the past 2 years in 2022 and 2023, but Charles had a higher pole to max win ratio than he had pole for his own wins. Like he
Right. Like
and
you don't want that.
Right, and we talked about it a bunch, and oh well, the cars just got that single lap pace and yada yada yada, making up excuses for it and everything. But it is a very like I mean you've named like two names and like maybe a third with Valtteri of people that you can look at and be like, oh yeah, if he's on pole, I'm fully expecting him to win. Odds on almost every time. So yeah, it's definitely something that is not always easy to do. So yeah, it speaks to Georgia's weekend for sure.
Yeah, big time. And then just a small note for Lewis: the mistake in qualifying, leading to P10, I believe, on the starting grid, and then he's able to have a drive that gets him back up onto the podium. So clearly some good juju going on for the Mercedes camp. So that's why they're my second winner for the week. I think we saw a lot of light coming from their garage.
Yeah, and it's a little bit circuit specific, I think, as well. The McLaren
Sure.
struggles a bit, and the Ferrari obviously had some degradation issues as well. But still, nonetheless, like it was a strong weekend, and he capitalized on having the best car on the weekend for sure. Which it's still not easy to do. There's a lot of good drivers out there looking to take that away. So yeah, big props to Mercedes on the weekend. But moving over into the losers, my first loser here for the weekend was the Alpine team, not the drivers. Just a really rough way for the weekend to go after the P2 P3 double podium in Brazil. You're in a great position as well with Pierre Gasly. Miraculously, I really don't know how he pulled out a P3 in the Alpine, but a phenomenal qualifying. Esteban Ocon P11 right outside of the points to start the race as well, and just having just a flop of a weekend. Gasly's engine completely dying mid-race, having to retire the car, and then for Esteban Ocon, the team tells him pit opposite Hulkenberg. Hulkenberg stays out, he pits, and the pit crew isn't there. And he just has to do basically a drive-through penalty for his race, just ruining his race and pitting on the next lap. And so just bad strategy and execution from the team. No fault to the drivers there, but an unfortunate weekend. And after taking that lead over Haas and a number of other teams in the Constructors' Championship, Haas was able to regain that lead this week. V-Carb picked up some points as well in that tight, contested 6, 7, 8 battle there. So really squandering a beautiful opportunity. I mean, I guess the engine blowing up, there's only so much you can do about that, but yeah, really rough weekend for the Alpine team.
Yeah, and it was looking like maybe a back-to-back repeat performance, kind of capitalizing on what they had from the Sao Paulo package. But yeah, just to tag on a little bit from Pierre, his qualifying session looked really good, obviously, and then to get however deep into the race and just have, by no fault of your own, your day ruined and effectively your weekend ruined after he was having such a strong performance. Yeah, definitely heartbreaking, and understandably, yeah, feeling like you're lost out on the weekend. And my last loser here would be Lando Norris. It felt like in a season that was pretty exciting overall, especially once McLaren kind of came into it, in the early phases. Yeah, it felt like he had a lot of fight throughout the whole thing. So to to this track and seeing the qualifying, like, probably not going to have as much pace, probably a little bit behind. Race wasn't going that well, not really able to, like, make ground ahead or make ground on the cars ahead. Yeah, just kind of began feeling like, man, he's gonna have a tough time trying to fight to get ahead of Max. So maybe just a little bit lackluster as a final stand for Lando against Max in the championship, but nothing crazy. They still were like 6-7 on the grid, still slurping up a bunch of points, still ahead of Ferrari. Like, we're looking good for the constructors. But my heart does go out to him. You would have liked to see, with two strong competitors, it go all the way to the end. Not because somebody's getting shafted or whatever, but just for some good competition. So
Yeah.
that's all as far as Lando.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. It's definitely not the spot to be in after putting up a fight to have the season end a little bit early in the Drivers' Championship. It's like you said, a little anticlimactic. But for Lando, I think this is a great opportunity for him to now have tested himself against the best. It gives him a lot of areas to focus on for improvement and everything for the coming year. But yeah, after that qualifying and being one spot behind Max and kind of knowing the McLaren wasn't going to be the top car on the weekend, I think it felt like without something crazy happening, that Max was locking it up pretty assuredly there. So yeah, tough way for that to finish, but he's now had a championship campaign that has been very competitive. A lot that you can learn from being, the teams always talk about being the hunter is a lot easier than being the hunted. To stay ahead. So I expect Lando to continue to grow. My second loser, though, was Checo. I talked about it a bunch already, so I won't harp too much, but just talk about, again, being beaten by Yuki in the V-Carb, being out-qualified by Yuki and Liam Lawson in the past 3 races. It is not looking really great for Checo over the past year, really, as a whole. He started off decently at the beginning with I think a couple of podiums, but really has failed to be successful and is the reason that Red Bull is in third in the Constructors' Championship right now. There's never been a time where the championship winner didn't finish first or second in the Constructors. So that really shows the campaign that Max put on, especially in comparison. It's tough to beat Checo. It's a stark contrast when you're put up against the guy who just won his 4th world championship in a row. But yeah, definitely a tough weekend for Checo to just kind of continue on this kind of mediocre season that he's having.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get the curse catchers in here, man. That second seat next to Max and the Red Bull.
I'm gonna try and dream about it tonight, and then next week I'll let you know what my dreams tell me is gonna happen. There might be a Nick Latifi in one seat and a Mick Schumacher in another. I don't know. Where my dreams are always a bit weird, so
okay.
I don't think if it'll actually come to fruition, but yeah, it will be interesting to see what they do. When Checo is costing them I don't know if the sponsorship money makes up for the millions that you're losing in constructors winnings. So might be some additional decisions to be made coming up. But just looking at the rest of the Grand Prix weekend, the one big note that I wanted to mention, because I saw a lot of conversation about it, I don't know if it was peculiar to you, but Carlos Sainz, when he was coming into the pit and the team told him to stay out, and he cut back across the pit entry line and continued on, there was a lot of conversation saying, oh, that should have been a penalty, like he crossed the pit entry. And so I did a little digging, and I guess the reason he didn't get penalized was because he didn't actually pit that lap. So if you cross the pit entry line and then do pit, then it's like a safety kind of penalty, like you pitted unsafely by crossing this line. Because he stayed out, which also seemed very dangerous, like you're coming up to that wall that splits the pit lane from the circuit and you're just zipping back out, seemed a little sketchy and probably a safety concern as well there. But I don't know if you caught that. It was kind of a funky instance during the race.
Yeah, I did catch that, and like the fact that it must not have struck me that much because they didn't say much about it. Lewis didn't seem happy about it. He was just like, "Hey, I don't think you can do that." But yeah, and I think because there was no penalty afterwards, like literally nothing happened. They didn't say anything ever again. It must have just like float from my brain. But yeah, now that we're talking about it, that is mighty unsafe to do and seems a bit crazy.
Yeah, and I just felt like it was one of those situations where like it wasn't a penalty technically, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a rule change where you're not allowed to, or maybe a marker like further or like closer to the pit lane where it's like if you're past this point you have to pit, because I think we've seen at some of the circuits that pit entry line starts very far out when the pit is directly on the straight as they're coming around. And so in those instances, when you're taking different lines through the corner, it can be a little difficult, or going 2-3 wide and whatnot early on in the race. So maybe there has to be a slight adjustment there. But if the concern is safety, the idea of just slamming into that little pointed wall that divides the pit entry and all, just it stresses me out a little bit. I was like when he dodged out of the pit lane, I was like, that didn't look great. So yeah, a weird moment, but that was my only other kind of quirky conversation other than talking about some of the teams that we haven't hit on yet.
Gotcha. Yeah, the only thing I could think to like prevent drivers from like dodging over that line is if you just put like a line of infants to just like hang out on the track there. Like definitely, well, you would learn very quickly who was naughty and who was nice, right?
Yeah, that would make for quite a I think that avoids the trying to be safe concern. So I can't imagine that happening, but that would definitely tell you which way some people lean. But looking at the race weekend as a whole, we talked about it a little bit, but looking at the Ferrari squad, I was pretty impressed with Leclerc and Carlos's drive and performance across the race weekend. Really nice finish from both of them in P3 and P4, but a little bit of tension between the two. We had Charles getting pretty irate on the radio at the end of the race after Carlos passed him after the team had told him, "Oh, Carlos has been instructed not to put any pressure on you." Carlos, I think, is looking at it and he's like, "Hey, I just put my 2 weeks notice in, man. Like, you, what are you gonna do? Fire me?" Like he's moving on. So at this point, he's looking out for himself and everything. I think he had the pace to get past Charles. It wasn't. I feel for Charles a little bit, being told, "Hey, we gave team orders," and then just getting blown past. But I don't necessarily think Carlos did anything super wrong there. But Charles might be okay seeing Carlos over in that Williams next year. That might be some sweet retribution for him to to see him as he's lapping him in the races this upcoming year.
Yeah, I was just gonna say he will likely be lapping that car at least once
Yeah, I could.
in the next year. But dude, I mean, I could talk at length about moments like this. Honestly, I don't love to see it from Charles. I don't love to see it from Carlos, but it's indicative of like poor pre-planning from the like pit wall in the team. It's clear that whatever decisions that are being made in these like strategy briefings and whatever, it's clear that like they're going in one ear and out the other of either one or both of the drivers, and maybe not at the same time, but like they're both having these moments of like, you know what, whatever, I'm just looking out for me. Yeah. And it's clear like lack of boundary building from the team is how I'm perceiving it, because every driver feels this way. Every single driver out there on the grid feels like they should be getting more than the other guy, and they should damn be getting more than everybody else on the grid, right? Oh, yeah. So it's not uncommon behavior, but it's weird how much we see it bleed through, specifically from the Ferrari garage. It's clear there's something going on about them not being able to manage these personalities that well, and then when it gets to the track, all bets are off because they're heated and they're trying to win millions of dollars. And yeah. I get it. I'd be pissed too if I'm Charles.
Oh, yeah.
So I can see it from both sides for the drivers, but ultimately it feels like a team problem of them not being able to lay down the law and say, look, these radios are not for your prima donna whine sessions. They are for like strategy and like talking to our drivers. So the fact that time in and time out we're getting these like little tiffs over the like Ferrari radio, I'm like,
Yeah, and I mean, maybe they're spending a little too much time in those strategy meetings making plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. Maybe they're or it could be like Fred Vasseur, and I love Fred. He's in my opinion, a great team principal. He's really building a strong organization, both from adding Lewis on, getting all of these talented engineers and bringing these people on board and everything. However, you don't see this kind of thing popping up as frequently on some of these other teams that have a more stern leadership approach. I mean, when you had Nico and Lewis crash into each other, take each other out back in 2016 or 2015 or whatever it was, like Toto made them both go to the Mercedes like factory and apologize to all of the staff for wrecking their cars. Like, Christian Horner is not going to be dealing with that BS and has put some race engineers and like engineers for the drivers like GP out there who can handle Max's whining and tell him to shut the fuck up nicely, to put him in a position to not be having these things, or the James Vowles will talk after the race or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when the last time I've heard Fred come over the radio to lay down the law. Not that it should happen that much, but maybe if there was a little more stern leadership from his side. that would calm some of these squabbles with two younger drivers who are very talented and butting heads. I think it will be a little different with Charles and Lewis next year. Lewis is always the gentleman, even when he is upset. He's very competitive, but really is very good with the way he handles things most of the time. So maybe that will reduce some of these things, but I wouldn't be shocked if it just the fieriness of the drivers overpowers the fear of getting put in your place a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty succinct way to put it, and that definitely comes across on the team radio. And I think you're right. They have been close to squandering like really strong results just because they didn't know who they wanted to like finish first. And that's like kind of a big problem. We see it like, yeah, just making really weird choices. Like Carlos Sainz is under real threat from Lewis Hamilton. Like Lewis Hamilton is like setting up for overtakes. Like he's in a position where he's like doing the like peeking out, you know, when they're like coming into corners, and Ferrari's like, Carlos, can we swap positions? Leclerc, can you pull over? Like, it's just so like, bro, like we're racing, dog.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I would love to see some of this shored up because I feel the same way as you. It's like this isn't happening to other teams, man. So yeah.
Yeah, and swapping, like you said, swapping positions, like where in dangerous, or not dangerous ways, but in a position where you could potentially lose places to a competitor because,
Two of them.
yeah, like it's just crazy that's where the decision. So even though Ferrari's strategy has improved from like bad pit stops and bad like race strategy, they're still clearly lacking in some of those other areas. But I think it will improve next year, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit more feistiness over the next couple weeks between the two. I mean, you don't have it's a triple header. You don't have these breaks to really like let that steam off. I think it's going to be one of those, if there's a little flashpoint between them, that there's going to be some more sparks and maybe some more fiery radio messages before the season's out.
And I mean, yeah, they're still in the hunt for like they could still win the constructors championship, and you know that's gonna be enough for them to chase down. So yeah, I could see that being a reality. Yeah, we talked a little bit about Lando and McLaren, but Piastri was right there. Had a little bit of a tougher start. You could see he got out there like right on lap one. Got a little bit dicey for him. I think he was in danger of like losing some serious positions. He was able to kind of gather it back, and from there was able to just kind of drive a pretty solid race plan. It didn't seem like a like progressive or like aggressive race plan. Didn't seem like they really had the pace overall like to do that. Held station though, didn't, I don't think, give up really any advantages to like their opponents or anything. So I think solid drive from McLaren, tougher start from Piastri, but yeah, overall solid points winning race.
Yeah, and they did what they needed to at a track that they knew they weren't going to be super strong at. They got as many points as they could. Yeah, the papaya orders were taken off, and so now they're free to just go after it. But I think they're going to be very smart about their decision making, just to ensure that they don't have any incidents that could cost them the constructors championship. Just status quo should hopefully clinch that for them, which would be super exciting for the McLaren team there. One guy who couldn't get fiery over the radio, who I should have led into that way better, but coming from Ferrari was Mr. Lance Stroll, who had no radio for the entire race. I was thinking about that, and it seemed like they just didn't really adapt to it at all, which is kind of weird. I feel like they know how you used to do it before the radios were good. Like, you put the little board up and you hang it out like in front of him as he's coming down the straight and everything so he can see it. Like, they have solutions for this that they could put out like box next lap or something, but it seemed like they couldn't figure out a way to communicate without the radio. Slow pit stop, and then just overall really kind of tanked his race not having that communication.
Well, I know Shaun White was cheering for him for sure. There is one person confirmed in the stands cheering for Lance. Radio or not, we know he has at least one fan, which I was very surprised to learn.
And it wasn't his own father, so that's...
Well, exactly. And the jury's still out on that. We're not sure if that's even the case.
Yeah, so, but yeah, very, very bizarre situation. I was just surprised that they didn't, like, come up with some sort of solution. I feel like it wasn't that hard to think of, like, write signs that he can read and tell him when to box. Like, it's going to be, especially with the race switching from being a planned one-stopper to a pretty solid two-stop race. Like, just an unfortunate spot for him. But yeah, I think the only other big notes that I had were Haas with Hülkenberg getting some more points, jumping back ahead of Alpine this week and capitalizing on their struggles. So Haas popping back up in the constructors' standings, but yeah, a pretty hectic race weekend as a whole.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, nice note there for Haas. I think they drove really well, specifically Hülkenberg up there in P8, I believe he finished. Yep. So yeah, that's a solid result for him. We saw some early battles between one of the Haas cars and Liam Lawson. They were really kind of getting their elbows out, but yeah, I would say that's probably sums it up pretty well for some of the back marker teams. I don't think like much to write home about, as we know some of those rosters are going to be changing. Go ahead.
I'll say just with Zhou, he had a nice weekend. He qualified P13. He finished P13. Had an actual like decent qualifying performance and everything. Valtteri was playing the teamwork game, trying to hold people up and give him that opportunity at the points and all. So it was nice to see the Sauber squad have someone up in the standings a little bit and not just being at the back there, barring someone having issues and everything throughout the race. So that was the only other thing I've really got. So props to Sauber for getting that, but yeah, still no points, unfortunately.
Still no points. That's okay. At this point, we're kind of hoping for no points, actually, so you don't like have this weird season where you're either going one way or, you know, like, if I want to see you finish strong and earn no points, right? You gotta keep doing your best.
Consistency is key.
Consistency is key. Okay, that's just an awful joke. I'm never gonna say anything like that again. Here's something that you haven't heard really from me, and I'm curious what your thoughts are. Now that we're at the end of the episode, nobody's listening anymore. I don't like the Las Vegas circuit.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just found myself like halfway through the race. I was like, I'm not even mad that Lando's not going to win. Like, this is just boring. Like, this circuit sucks.
It's a pretty boring circuit.
Okay.
There was some competitive battles here and there, but it was one of those like not much is happening. The only excitement really was the Mercedes team being at the top of the field this time, and that mix around of things. Like even with Max and Lando, there was no real tension past lap one.
Right.
The only excitement I had was like is Lewis gonna get him? Is Lewis gonna come back and get snatch it away from George here right at the end? Because Lewis was flying in the second half of the race, but that was really like the main thing that I was keeping an eye on. However, I did stay up for the whole thing. I didn't fall asleep mid race. I stayed up till 1, went to bed at 3. So like it at least wasn't that boring, but it wasn't the best race for sure. And I think the circuit is just not. The circuit's there because it's a big draw as opposed to for the racing. It's
right.
It's why they've added on some of these. Yeah, it's why they've added on some of these circuits. And like I said, I don't want to. I've said it earlier in the season. I don't want Circuit of the Americas to go away because I think that's a really good track for racing. Swapping things like that out for just another street circuit in a random city doesn't appeal to me. Like it's not what I would look forward to. So Las Vegas is not the best race, but there's lots of lights and shiny things. You get the sphere, Justin.
Dude, that might be the worst part. You get the like weird like act outs from the drivers where they're like waving like down to the people from the sphere or something. Like that's weird.
Yeah.
It's some level of like there's no suspended disbelief here that like the driver is up there. You have Sergio Perez doing this weird like thumbs down thing to people on the dome. Dude, I
prefer it when it's the big yellow smiley face and they just slap an F1 helmet on it.
Yeah.
That's like, personally my go-to. But how terrifying would that be to be like just driving to work on the highway and just out of the corner of your eye you just see some like massive face just on this thing like by you. It has to be bizarre just during like the normal work like week for people. Even with Vegas already being kind of a bizarre place in general. But yeah.
It's one of the weirdest places.
The Max World Champion graphic, though, on the sphere looked pretty cool, so I can't be too mad.
Yeah, like, there's, like, some fine uses for it, but, like, overall, it strikes me as, like, I don't use this word a lot, dystopian.
That's a pretty good description. It's pretty strange, and it matches with the kind of alien nature of Las Vegas, where you can get married by an Elvis impersonator and go to see Cher sing while you eat at a buffet, or I don't know, Cher still has a residency there, but yeah, it's a odd place. But anyway, that does wrap up our Las Vegas Grand Prix weekend review. So that'll lead us right here into the cool down lap for this week. But real quick, before we do that, the podium top finishers, we had George Russell P1, Lewis Hamilton P2, Carlos Sainz wrapping up the podium in P3. For the driver's standings, Max clinched the world championship, but there still is the potential for some fights down the grid, of course. Lando and Charles are 21 points apart, so anything can still happen there. And then McLaren is leading Ferrari by 24 points in the Constructors' Championship, who are then ahead by 39 points over, 29 points over the Red Bull squad. So still a little contentious there in the Constructors as well, but 2 races to go. We've got F2 and F3, or no, not F3, F2 coming up in the next couple of race weekends. And I believe maybe some F1 Academy. I don't quite remember, but
Yeah, Formula One Academy ends in Losail, I'm pretty sure. So I
okay.
think the next race weekend
In
out
Qatar.
will be
Okay.
their finish. Yeah, if I read the calendar correctly.
No, that sounds right. So yeah, we'll have the next week. We'll be coming back for the Qatar Grand Prix review at Losail, and then of course we have Abu Dhabi at the season finale there. So, bringing us into the cool down lap this week, we have our flavor of the week. Justin, why don't you lead us off here?
All right, so my food here for the week, nice and simple, but boy, is it a treat. I love it every time, but I don't have it all the time. Sometimes I like to have an ice cream cone for dessert. Sometimes we'll get like the nice like little fudge dipped, so it's got a little chocolate at the top. We'll just get some
Absolutely.
whatever, some chocolate peanut butter, whatever you like, and just a nice little at-home ice cream cone. I just go single dip, nothing crazy.
Okay.
But yeah, really, after a long day, man, licking down an ice cream cone feels pretty solid.
All
And then
right.
my visual medium here for the week, this is what I was glued to all weekend. It was my first time tuning in, and I'm so happy that I did. It was my first time at the North American Eternal Weekend. So there's 3 different Eternal Weekends over the course of the year. This one was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Shout out PA for the, like I said, the Magic Eternal Weekend. So that's a big 10K legacy tournament and a
Okay.
big 5K vintage tournament. So 10K being $10,000 for the first prize winner for the legacy, and then 5K for the first prize winner of the vintage tournament. Coverage was awesome. One of my favorite parts was pro player Reed Duke as one of the casters. So having the like inside the mind of a pro player who would be thinking about some of these deck matchups, maybe like what does sideboarding look like, some of these things. So having him on the part of the like casting group, casting talent, that was my favorite part. Reed Duke is probably like my favorite player in Magic that I know from like the like pro scene slash kind of educate the masses on different formats that they play. You can always catch Reed Duke giving you like a deck tech or how to play. So very intelligent, very skilled player. So catching the Legacy Eternal Weekend and the Vintage Eternal Weekend was just awesome. Genuinely enjoyed it. And then my music here for the week, and this is where you'll be able to hop into the conversation. Just imagine my surprise when, oh, I'm just here. I'm just going to sit down. I'm just going to look for a podcast to listen to. Let me see if I can pass my time. Bro, Kendrick Lamar has a new album. All right, guess I'm just locked into this for the next hour. I guess that's just what I'm doing. Like, for me, that is the definition of put down whatever else I was doing. I guess I'm just listening to this. Like that's literally how it was today. Get home, I see GNX on the YouTube music. I'm like, what the fuck is this, dude? I get these beats banging in my headphones, dog. So, such a surprise. Great album, honestly. I really enjoyed it. More of like it felt like he was kind of unchained in some ways. He wasn't yelling at us for feeling some type of way about him. He wasn't telling us about old traumas and pains that he has. I mean, hey, that's cool. I love to hear it, but it wasn't on this album. This album felt more like just kind of for the homies to listen to and enjoy the vibe, bringing on a trio of young artists who really kind of rounded out the soundscape to the album. But man, imagine my surprise when Kendrick Lamar has a new album. So exciting.
Yeah, and not a big release ahead of time. We got the the bar that was ahead of the Not Like Us music video, the reincarnated I was stargazing. So I was happy to see that get mixed in. I enjoyed it a lot, and it felt like kind of just a more fun, like, and with these different features and everything. It's obviously a studio album, but it had a little bit of a mixtape vibe that if you have listened back to like Stone Mountain with Childish Gambino, or even it's probably the only Drake that I've listened to and not been miserable through, but his mixtape that he did with Future back probably 10 years ago.
Right.
It was it's a fun little album. I like the mixes. I like the bringing in the Latin music as well, and some of the different just soundscapes, I guess, and beats that he mixed in throughout. But yeah, a lot more fun. Still poking a little bit at people here and there, brings up a little Wayne at one point, and of course has his own way of throwing some digs out there, but he is like, no double entendres here. I'm just coming straight at you with everything. And I've been enjoying listening to that as well. So that's the main reason I wanted to do Flavor of the Week this week. So I had a feeling you would figure that out, but I thought I'd leave that up for you to put together there. For my visual medium this week, Colleen and I have gotten to pick back up Silo, which just started its second season. So last week, the past 2 weeks, they've had the first 2 episodes of the season out on Apple TV. It's been really good. I talked about it, I think, before, but post-apocalyptic kind of situation, living in an underground bunker. They left you out a pretty big cliffhanger at the end of season 1 and have kind of continued on the first 2 episodes of the season, giving you 2 completely different perspectives of what's happening over here and what's happening on the other side of the cliffhanger. So you now have been able to kind of start piecing together the trajectory of where this plot's going to go, and it's I'm looking forward to the rest of the season as it comes out. So it's been a good watch. And then my food this week, just like a funny thing that Colleen and I both were going out and doing. We haven't done a big shopping trip in a while, so we both kind of went out separately for small shopping trips. I didn't look at what she had gotten before I went out, and so I'm at the Acme. They have a deal where it's like if you buy 3 packs of cheese, then you get a deal, but you have to buy 3 packs. Mm-hmm. And I come home, open the cheese drawer, and there are 3 brand new packs of cheese sitting in there. So we had a lot of cheese to go through. I've made mac and cheese twice this past week to start working through some of this and everything. And I love mac and cheese. I did a buffalo chicken mac and cheese the other week. Yesterday I did just kind of a more standard one to go along with a fried chicken sandwich. But nothing sets up a flavor for the week like having too much of something and needing to get rid of it. So I've definitely enjoyed that, even with the small gaffe that I made there. So well,
at least you can both be sure that you are both bargain hunters and can sleep with the knowledge that, like, if there's a sale to be had, they will, and both of you can have this peace of mind. My partner will engage with the sale. Like, that's key.
Yeah, we know that we're going to eat the cheese anyway, so might as well go for it. But yeah, that's my food for this week, and that wraps up the Flavor of the Week for this episode.
Yeah, and the closing of the cool down lap brings us to the end of the episode. So just wanted to say thank you very much to everyone for listening. Remember, new episodes after every Formula One race weekend. We only have two more in this 2024 season after a long 24 race season. Like I said, we got two left. But just want to say thank you very much for spending your time with us. We really appreciate you. Tell your friends and family that we put out the best Formula One content that you've ever heard. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.